Hello, how you doing? Okay, so today we are going to be covering chapter 4 in our book. I am Anthony Balzano. I'm a professor of anthropology and sociology at Sussex County Community College here in Newton, New Jersey. And this course is Introduction to Anthropology, Anthropology 101. You can contact me with any questions about this recording at abalzano@sussex.edu. And today we're going to be covering in our course textbook, The Human Story by Alexandra Brewis and other authors. We're going to be covering chapter 4 on primates. Ah, I have my Bigfoot costume, but I'm not going to put it on right now. We don't have the time. But it would be great to do this lecture in my Bigfoot costume one time. We're going to do three things today to cover chapter 4. One, we want to talk about what is a primate. Secondly, we want to talk about primate taxonomy. And then the last thing we want to talk about are fossil primates, some of the evolution of primates and how they evolved. Okay, and so, well, what is a primate? Well, there are lots of anatomical features that all primates have in common. Now, when we say primate, we mean everything from a lemur and a loris and a galago to tarsiers to monkeys, New World monkeys, Old World monkeys, and we'll cover all of those when we talk about the taxonomy of monkeys, taxonomy of primates. And that also includes apes, lesser apes like gibbons and siamangs, and great apes like gorillas and bonobos and chimpanzees, and us. We are also primates. We belong to the order of Primata in scientific taxonomy of all animals, right? Um, and what all of these primates have in common is one is grasping hands. That is, they have a thumb and we can grasp things like this. And humans are the only ones that don't have a grasping foot. And so the next time you see a monkey, check out its feet. It looks like they have hands on their feet. Okay. And humans, our ancestors used to have a grasping toe, but we don't anymore because we walk bipedally. All primates have nails and not claws. All primates have relatively larger brains relative to their body size than all other mammals. And so primates are really big brained. All primates have color vision. Okay, not only that, but they have stereoscopic vision. And that is, we look at the same object with both eyes that give us a depth perception. And all primates have that. And that was a great adaptation for living in trees because you want to have depth perception when you're jumping from one branch to the other. And we have those things as well. All primates have a reduced sense of smell relative to mammals. Okay, so we don't smell as well as mammals, as dogs or as cats or as big, or as any kind of a mammal, any kind of a big animal, elk, beavers, rats, mice. They have really good smell, but we don't. We have less of an ability to smell. All primates have the same sort of general dentition, four different kinds of teeth: incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Now, they're in different amounts depending on the monkey or the ape. Humans have two incisors, one canine, two premolars, and three molars. In some of the monkeys, they have an extra premolar or they'll have one less molar, but it's basically those four kind of general dentition that all monkeys have. Of course, all primates lactate, okay, and they have relatively smaller litters, okay. Twins are okay, but primates don't tend to have lots of offspring at once. All right. What's really unique also about all primates is that primate offspring require extensive parental care. And there's a nice little chart in your book showing how much parental care that different kind of primates have. Of course, humans need more parental care than, let's say, lemurs or lorises or galago monkeys. Okay, but all primates require that what they call parental investment. And the last anatomical thing that all primates have that mammals don't have, and this would seem kind of a funny looking one, right, is that we have a bony eye orbit. So if you look at a skull, okay, we have bone behind our eyeball that protects our eyeball from the side or from the top. And mammals don't have that. And then finally, all primates tend to nurse their young for a much longer period of time than mammals do. Okay, and so those are some of the things that all primates have in common. Okay, now there's all different kinds of primates. They vary from a 1 ounce primate, which is a mouse lemur, up to a gorilla, which is a male gorilla averages about 350 pounds. Most primates are diurnal, okay, but there are a few that are nocturnal, especially a couple of lorises and lemurs, and there's the owl monkey, which is a New World primate, like in South America, Central America, and the owl monkey is nocturnal also. But by and large, we're a diurnal order of mammals. Okay, we're up in the day, we're up with the light, and we sleep at night. All primates survive and adapt and reproduce in social groups. Okay, we are a very touchy-feely order of mammals. Now, there's a couple of primates that do are solitary, and that would be like for orangutans. The adult male spends a lot of time by themselves, but when they mate, they come back to the social group. But other than that, all monkeys spend their entire life within a troop, which is what we call a primate society, is often referred to as a troop. Okay, you spend your life in a troop. Now, what's interesting in terms of primate behavior is that when we get into those social groups, primates have a number of different ways of doing it. Okay. There are it's not uncommon for some primate species to form pair bonds, male female together for a long period of time. Gibbons do that, and Siamese do that. Okay. More commonly, and we find this with a lot of monkeys that spend most of their time on the ground, that is terrestrially versus arborally. Terrestrial species tend to live in troops that are multi-male, multi-female. Okay. The interesting thing about all primates also is that they form male and female hierarchies. Okay, so there are dominant females and dominant males among all primate species. And so the species that spend their time all on the ground, like baboons, okay, and chimpanzees are terrestrial except when they sleep. They'll go up in the trees when they sleep. Baboons don't. They're on the veldt. They're on the plain. They are on the savanna. Okay, they're on the ground all the time. You'll have multi-male, multi-female groups with a lot of terrestrial species. Although you'll find, in New World monkeys like capuchin monkeys and spider monkeys and howler monkeys that are arboreal, they also form multi-male, multi-female groups. So that's a pretty common one. Now, for some species, they form what we would call there's one dominant male and females, sometimes referred to as a harem. Gorillas do that. Okay, and so in a gorilla troop, there'll be a dominant male and then females and then the offspring. Where are the rest of the gorillas? Where are the rest of the male gorillas? Well, they form what we call a bachelor group, and they're always on the periphery of the harem, and that's the kind of social group that they form. Pretty interesting, right? There are also some species like the tamarin, golden tamarin, which is a really small a monkey in the New World in the Amazon, that's about as big as your hand. The golden tamarin monkey, and they form societies where it's a dominant female with a bunch of males, and the female mates with all of the males. And it's really interesting because they're so small and the female needs a lot of energy to nurse her offspring, she goes out and feeds, and the males within her group are protecting the offspring. So it creates what we call a polyandrous society, that is a society of many males versus a polygynous society, a society of many females. Okay. All right. So those are the different kinds of societies that are formed. Some are boreally in the trees, and some terrestrially. One final thing about different kinds of primates is that they get around in different ways. If they're arboreal and they're spending time in trees, we call those kinds of primates clingers and leapers. Okay, they're clinging to branches and trees and they're jumping, and that's the way they move. Also, if they're arboreal, they sometimes, if they're not clingers and leapers like a lot of monkeys are and a lot of prosimians like lemurs and lorises are, they're brachiators. They're swinging from one tree to the next, and lesser apes do that, and great apes do that. Siamangs and gibbons will brachiate. They will swing very rapidly through the canopy of forests. Okay, orangutans do it as well, but they're not very fast. They're moving very slowly because these are real orangutans are really big, uh, 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 big in size. If they're on the ground, we could say they're quadrupedal, that is, they're walking on all four legs. But when we get to chimpanzees and and gorillas and bonobos, those kinds of great apes, they're terrestrial. They're not so much quadrupedal, but we say they're knuckle walkers. And so they don't actually walk on their flat of their palms. They walk actually on their knuckles right there. And so they actually do knuckle walking. Now, you sometimes will see a chimpanzee and a gorilla, maybe a few other monkeys like a spider monkey might, and a capuchin monkey certainly will. We see that. They will actually get up on two legs and walk a little bit. And so some monkeys are occasionally bipedal, but none of them are habitually bipedal like we are, like Homo sapiens are. Okay. Now, if you go to page 94, 95 in the textbook, there's a wonderful taxonomy there. So let's talk about taxonomy. And the monkeys in that taxonomy are basically those are all the ones that we want to know about. Okay. Now the way it's set up, as you'll see, is there are strepsirrhines and there are haplorhines, which are two different kinds of primates. Strepsirrhines are what we call wet-nosed monkeys. That's what strepsirrhine means. And then there are haplorhines, which are dry-nosed monkeys. And so the wet-nosed monkeys are lemurs, lorises, and galagos. All right. They don't look much like, they look like a monkey, but not very much like a monkey. Okay. And they're sometimes called prosimians, which means almost monkey. Okay. So they are the wet-nosed monkeys, and lemurs are limited to Madagascar. Okay, but there are wet-nosed monkeys, lemurs and lorises in Africa, and some of them are in Asia as well. Now, of the dry-nosed monkeys, there's one really unusual one that's by itself in a suborder of haplorhines, and those are tarsiers. And a tarsier looks a lot like a lemur or a loris, but it's not, because genetically it's much more closely related to a monkey. And that's why tarsiers, if you look on that taxonomy, they're sort of on their own in their own little group. And then we get into what we call anthropoids, which are a type of a haplorhine that includes us, all monkeys, and all apes. So those are anthropoids. Now, there are a few different kinds of anthropoids. One are New World monkeys, which are flat-nosed monkeys called platyrrhines. And then there are cheek-pouched monkeys. And by the way, the platyrrhines all live in the New World. And then there are broad-nosed monkeys, which are known as catarrhines. All right. And of the catarrhines, there are Old World monkeys, which are cercopithecoids. And then there are hominoids, which are apes, and then there are hominins, which are us. Okay, and so there's cercopithecoids and hominoids and hominins, which are all different kinds of catarrhines, broad-nosed primates. Okay, as opposed to the um, catarrhines are narrow-nosed and platyrrhines are broad-nosed. Okay, and all that is on there on page 94 and 95. Okay, just a few notes about some of the narrow-nosed monkeys, the platyrrhines. Now, platyrrhines are broad-nosed monkeys. They're all indigenous to South America. Okay, and they're unique in that they will have prehensile tails. Okay, and their prehensile tail means they can grab with their tail. So if you ever see a monkey hanging by its tail, you know it's a New World monkey. Um, so let's go over to the Old World monkeys. That is the Cercopithecodies, and the Cercopithecodies are both arboreal and terrestrial, whereas the New World monkeys are all arboreal. Okay. Um, when we get into the Old World monkeys, there are two different types. There are leaf-eating monkeys, which are known as colobus monkeys, and that's in the taxonomy that you'll see. And then there are the cheek-pouched monkeys, which are all of the other monkeys and all the other apes. All right. Now, the cheek-pouched monkeys are still cercopithecoids, okay? But the leaf-eating monkeys, which have a multi-chambered stomach, those are known as colobus monkeys or colobine monkeys. Okay. Now, when we get over to the Cercopithecodies and the apes, great apes, etc., they have remember those the four different kinds of teeth. They have specialized kind of molars, and their molar will actually be adapted to the kind of food that they eat. All right. Now, if you look at a leaf-eating monkey, it will have a very sharp kind of molar known as a bilofondant. Okay, and that's described in the book. But if you look at a monkey that squishes a lot of leaves, like a colobus monkey, it's going to have a flatter surface. All right. And so the kind of molars that the different monkeys have will be dependent on the kind of food that they're after, whether it's nuts or it's leaves or it's more of an omnivorous diet. All right, they will have a kind of the different kind of cusps on their molars. Okay. Um, the interesting thing about hominoids, that is apes, whether it's a gibbon, a siamang, which are lesser apes, or a gorilla, a chimp, an orangutan, or a bonobo, which are great apes, they are all tailless. Okay, so apes have no tails, and it, 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 it's a distinguishing characteristic of them. Um, is there anything else to say about the taxonomy other than that at the very end of that chapter or that section at around page 100 or so, 104 or so, it talks about how a unique behavior of chimpanzees is that they hunt in cooperative troops. Okay, so they are meat eaters. That's a unique thing. Only chimpanzees. Will bonobos eat meat? They will. And will they hunt cooperatively? They will, but not as much as chimps. Chimps will go after. They will hunt small monkeys, and they will eat them. Of course, they don't cook them. The other thing they talk in there about the taxonomy is that chimps and bonobos are much more closely related to hominins, that is us, than other great apes. Okay, and so a common ancestor of chimpanzees and bonobos and humans is much more closely related in time than the common ancestor of all apes, and that's a point they want to make there. So the last part of this chapter deals with primate evolution. All right, so primate evolution happened. It started, our first primate emerged about 60 million years ago. And there's a cool little section there about page 104, 105, 106, where they talk about deep time. All right, and how a primate is a mammal. Mammals evolved around 200 million years ago. We see our first primate about 60 million years ago. And it names some of those primates. It names some of the primates in if you look on page 108, it names some of those primates. Okay, now what's interesting about those primates is some of the very first primates were insect eaters. All right, and humans eat some insects, but they were insectivorous. All right, but primates really didn't explode in numbers. Okay, until around 40 million years ago. And it corresponded at the same time as we see angiosperm plants evolve and become very common. Angiosperm plants are plants that produce fruits, okay, with a seed. And so primates really spread out a lot and evolved in lots of different ways when angiosperms and different kind of fruits evolved. And so primate evolution sort of is timed at the same time as fruiting plants. And so then we went from being insectivorous species to fruit-eating species, and then of course leaf-eating species too. And so we were largely, of course, vegetarian until apes evolved, and we see some meat eating with chimpanzees. So we think that our common ancestors happened around that same time. Another section that they talk about is how did monkeys get to South America, and they got there around 25 million years ago, shortly after the angiosperm and lots of primates were around. And our best theory about that is that they floated from the old world to the new world on flotsam. Okay, and that's the best, simplest quality explanation for how primates ended up in the New World. And then they evolved there in much the same way that they evolved in Africa, which is an example of convergent evolution. Okay, similar species in different places evolving in more or less the same kind of way. Now, about 15 million years ago, what's interesting is that there was a lot of climatic change happening, and places like in the area around Egypt, which used to be wet in a big wet rainforest, and those parts of Central Africa that were now desert dried up, and many primates that evolved there from around 15 million years ago moved to Europe, where it was a much better climate for primate survival. And what evolved in Europe were a lot of ancient now fossilized apes. And so you have some really interesting named apes like Oreopithecus and Oranopithecus, again, Dryopithecus, okay? And they evolved in Europe. And it wasn't until there was another climatic change that those apes came back to Africa and then evolved into the kind of apes that eventually led to the common ancestors of hominins. All right, and so that plays a really interesting role in human evolution. One final point about primates is that nearly every primate is in danger of extinction. Many primates it's necessary that they live in protected areas or they live in sanctuaries. And at the very end of this chapter, they talk about different kinds of primate sanctuaries. In some parts of the world, primates are still hunted for food, okay, and or they are protected by local populations, and that's really interesting. In the United States, for example, in northeastern Louisiana or northern Louisiana, there is a chimpanzee sanctuary where all the chimpanzees that used to be lab chimps were moved to when a moratorium was declared on doing scientific research on chimpanzees. And that was only about 5, 10 years ago. And so all of these chimps were taken out of their lab cages and they were moved to this amazing sanctuary. And there's amazing news that's coming out of that sanctuary about the primatologists who are there helping to manage that. Okay, that is chapter 4. And have a great day, and we'll send me any questions that you might have. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.